Base has dropped on a February 21st edition of Soccer Down Here. It's a freestyle Friday. We're going to be bouncing around all kinds of different topics. If you guys have questions, tweet at us at Soccer Down Here. Hour number 2, Mike Conti will join us at 10 o'clock. Felipe Cardenas of The Athletic will join us at 10:30. Tons of stuff to get into, John, but we got to start with CONCACAF Champions League. Hashtag CCL Fever was nuts last night. 12 goals in total. 5-3 New York City defeats San Carlos. 2-2 draw in the nightcap, Seattle and Olympia. Where do you want to start with it?
Let's start with the last one first.
Okay, thoughts?
I have them. Seattle looked like they hit a wall, I want to say, in the 60th. And you got to see what happens when that goes down. And you got to give Olympia a lot of credit for continuing to grind away on it. And, that to me was an entertaining match. And, I think that it was a combination for Seattle anyway. One, getting caught with your first match of the year, and then also the defensive issues that you've been talking about at the back. I think that especially on the second goal, it was a combination of things for me, but great grind out result for Olympia coming out of there at 2-2.
It's not a great result for Olympia, though, because they needed more.
True.
It's good they got something out of it, but I don't expect, them to go into Seattle and have an expectation of winning that match outright. They needed more. It was a bad start from them. The opening goal from Seattle was a nice one from João Paulo. I thought he was good. Definitely showed why they brought him in, why they prioritized bringing him in from Botafogo. The backline had its moments. I wonder if a backline of Nuhu, Tolo, Xavier Arriaga, Andrade, and Leerdam are going to be enough to be a top team. I Nuhu is a guy that everybody loves because he's kind of wild. He goes forward. He's different. I don't know if you want that as a defender so much. So I've got questions there. We'll just have to see Arriaga and Andrade and how they come together and how that works in the middle. Leerdam's a good right back. Stephen Fry is one of the top goalkeepers in the league. He had a couple just outstanding saves last night. But Seattle couldn't put the game away. And yes, the legs were heavy. They were a little fortunate to get the second goal because Olympia was all over Seattle early in the second half. That goal came against the run of play, and Seattle honestly should have had a third. Jordan Morris maybe needed to be more selfish in trying to set up Raul Ruidiaz and gave away an opportunity to make it 3-0 and end the whole thing as a competitive contest. But the legs were gone in the second half, and they were gone. I don't know if they came back from halftime. That's the issue that Seattle had here. Atlanta didn't have as much of an issue with this, although, it hits everybody because you're not at full fitness. Seattle, it hit much harder, and they were able to hold on enough. Arboleda with 2 goals in the second half, 63rd and 81st minute. The second goal was a bad one to give up.
Yes.
It's not enough for Olympia. Seattle did the job. They should be fine in the second leg. But it's a little dicier than they would like. They had a chance to put everything away. They didn't. Olympia still goes into Seattle with a shot. My question coming out of this, let's talk refereeing a little bit early. The Arboleda challenge on Stephen Fry was horrendous.
Mm-hmm.
Studs up to the rib cage, and Stephen Fry, I think some people have confused it. Stephen Fry didn't get a yellow for that play. He got a yellow for challenging Arboleda afterwards. It was the way he got in his face and challenged him that saw that yellow. The fact that Arboleda didn't see a red is just awful refereeing. There's no way around it. Studs up to a player, especially a goalkeeper, and above the waist, there's just no question it's a red card. If you had VAR, easy red card. No problem at all. It's a red card that gets looked at. It should have been a red regardless. And that's poor refereeing, and that had a huge effect on the match because if he's sent off, well, he's not going to score 2 goals in the second half, and Seattle puts the game away before they run out of legs. So bad call there. You expect that in CONCACAF.
What was the term that you used yesterday for the center ref that is not like Jair Marufo? Would you call him a poker dealer?
Blackjack dealer.
Blackjack dealer. Thank you.
But
yeah.
I mean, that's not the case here. He gave out 4 cards. I mean, that's 4 is probably right on the average. And this actually would be an interesting math project. I think it's somewhere between 3 and 4 yellow cards is typical when I look at it around MLS. I'd have to look at CONCACAF as a whole to see if that's typical. Maybe it's a little bit higher for CONCACAF, but 4 is not out of the realm of possibility here to have a normal, match being refereed. It's just the fact that it should have been a red. I mean, there shouldn't have even been a yellow to Arboleda. It should have been a red, straight red, because there's no way to.
I mean, Fry lifted up Fry lifts up his jersey, and he shows because we couldn't really see him because of the angle of the camera, just the closeness of the lens. But Fry lifts up his jersey and is trying to show the impact marks to the referee as to what went down there. That
trick never works, though. Referees don't want to see that. They don't want to be shown up in that way. You see that all the time. It never works. So I get it. You're going to have contact, and it happens, but this is dangerous, reckless. It studs up very high on the goalkeeper, who usually gets overly protected. This time wasn't even near minimum level of protection. Should have been a red, and that would have changed everything. But again, you go into these matches and you expect those sorts of things to happen on the road in CONCACAF. And it did. And Seattle kept their head. They go out and get the 2-2 draw, and they're in the driver's seat in the second leg.
And then the first one, obviously, crazy. I can't remember the last time that any team in CONCACAF Champions League put up 5. I honestly cannot remember the last time that went down.
It's honestly not that crazy, and I'll tell you why. So New York City comes out, gets a goal in the 13th minute. It's a beautiful cross from Ronald Matarrita, curling around the back line. Eber at the near post. Eber gets a second in the 35th minute. Aguilar pulls one back for San Carlos in the 45th, so it's 2-1 at the half, but New York City, with 2 away goals, was feeling really good about themselves. They get a penalty in the 52nd. Eber completes the hat trick, first hat trick by an MLS player in Champions League competition since the branding change from the Champions Cup. Then Callens adds one in the 61st to take it to 4-1. You're golden at that point. You've got 4 away goals. San Carlos is not going to score 4 more goals the rest of the night to get it to win 5-4, and then they're not going to score, you can expect, those kinds of goals on the road. San Carlos does pull one back through Mena in the 63rd. Then they get it to 4-3 in the 79th. Omar Brownie, I think New York City had kind of shut down a little bit at this point, losing their focus with such a big lead, but also legs and fatigue. But they get one more, Mitrita, in the 92nd. So once New York City got to halftime at 2-1, you're playing with house money. And I think the focus slipped. It's mid-February. It's early. You're not completely locked in. And you knew that at that point, you're in pretty good shape because this is a team that is probably not going to travel well at all next week.
Yeah.
New York City, once they got 2, I think they felt good. Once they got to 4, it's party time, and they're thinking about what the drinks are going to be after the match.
That plus 155 was looking pretty solid, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'd never understood that one. San Carlos is having a bad season in Costa Rica, and they've never been here before, and they have very few players with the pedigree of this kind of competition, and it showed. I mean, it showed. So New York City did the job that they went in to do, and they did it with Maxi Morales coming off the bench. They did it with Tati Castellanos coming off the bench. They didn't field a weak lineup by any stretch, and they won 5-3. So New York City is good to go for the next round.
Yep. And you look at that. If you didn't watch any of the match and you see that 5 show up there, there's an expletive that would normally come out of my mouth at that point. But yeah, I mean, Olympia having to go back to Seattle, having given up 2 goals at home, and then obviously with what San Carlos gave up, it's looking pretty solid for both MLS sides.
It's looking pretty solid for the home teams in the second leg to go through in the majority of the situations. So we look at next week's matches. Starts in Kennesaw on Tuesday, 8 o'clock, Atlanta hosting Motagua. 1-1, Atlanta's got the away goal. You would expect that Atlanta can do what they need to do to advance. Second match of the day is 10 o'clock, Cruz Azul hosting Portmore. Cruz Azul has a 2-1 lead. They're in great shape. They should go through. Wednesday, 6 o'clock, New York City hosting San Carlos. If there's 10 people there, it's not going to make a difference. New York City wins. They're going to go through with a 5-3 lead going into it. Wednesday at 8, you've got a couple really interesting ones. Montreal hosting Saprissa, 2-2. But Montreal has 2 away goals. They would be in the driver's seat here, but I don't know by how much. And then also in Monterrey, Tigres hosting Alianza. Tigres trails 2-1, but they have that 1 away goal. Where's their confidence going to be after losing the 1-0 lead? And they're not in a great run of form right now. I'm really curious to see what Alianza can do in this one, because they went to Monterrey last year and they were not overawed by it. So that experience is going to help them. If I'm picking an upset in the second round, or just an upset to advance, it's Alianza right now. I think they're in the best shape. I think they have the best pedigree to do it too. Club America and Comunicaciones is Wednesday at 10 o'clock. Should be Club America all the way. They have the away goal. It's 1-1 going into it. They should be fine, which would, if both teams do what they should do, set up Atlanta and Club America in the quarterfinals. Thursday night, both games are at 10. Seattle, Olympia. It's 2-2 on aggregate. Seattle should be fine with the 2 away goals. They should be able to take care of Olympia up in the Pacific Northwest. And then LAFC has to go for it in a big way. They got nothing out of the first leg in León. León's got a 2-goal advantage coming in. There's a good likelihood that León finds a goal because they have a ton of firepower. I'll be really curious to see what León does lineup-wise this weekend in Liga MX, but LAFC has to just completely go for it. It could be a really fun game to watch for a neutral and a really nerve-wracking game to watch for LAFC fans and for León fans.
And the other story for me out of Montreal and Saprissa are the injuries that came out of the first leg for the Impact, and level of seriousness, recovery, and all that stuff, and what the lineup's going to look like for the second leg.
Yeah, and I have not seen updates on them just yet. With travel, probably going to get some of those updates today out of Montreal. I'm not sure what their media availability is today after training. What do we have on the Twitters about CCL fever from last night?
Okay, let's see. Uniting and conquering after the show yesterday. Everybody's trying to find out if we know a Miles Robinson update and immigration status updates 5 days before leg 2.
I'm not a lawyer with immigration, and I'm not a doctor with examining the players, so there's just no way to know. Until something's given, not going to know. What about the games from last night? That's what I wanted to stay with.
Kevsey says, based on the Fry collision, I have to assume Barco will receive a retroactive yellow for allowing his head to contact the player's elbow during open play. These are the rules in San Pedro Sula esta semana.
Fry didn't get the yellow for the challenge. He got it for I think getting in Arbeloda's face afterwards. I don't blame him for getting in his face, by the way, at all. But no way you're getting a yellow on that challenge. It should have been a red. The yellow's fine because, anytime you step to a player in that way, you are escalating a situation. That's where you're normally going to see a yellow. I get it. It's kind of letter of the law stuff, but it should have been a red. There's just no way to argue out of a red card on that. It's reckless. It's dangerous. The fact that it's on a goalkeeper and it wasn't a red is even more shocking because usually that bar is lower for a foul committed on a goalkeeper than higher. So red, yellow is probably where it should have fallen, and then the game is completely different. But referee did not want to send anybody off last night.
Joe Bost using the hashtag Friday frivolity.
That's a good word.
Oh, the CONCACAFiness of the Seattle match. 6 yellows, including both managers, even though I think it was an assistant coach and a manager, in like 25 minutes. Holy mother of pearl, Joe says. Wish I could have watched the second half.
Yeah, it was kind of bonkers. I mean, you had 36 shots in total. Pretty much anywhere you were within sight of goal, you're firing. Both teams put 7 on target, 2 goals, so both goalkeepers had 5 saves. It was a wild one. I mean, it was an entertaining one. Olympia ended up with 62% of the possession in the second half, and that's where Seattle's legs went. I do wonder a little bit about Seattle's ability to close these things out because I worry about them defensively. So when the legs went, they looked very wobbly. They didn't look in control. I think Atlanta looked far more in control when they got tired late in the match. I felt like, yes, they did concede some chances, but they also created some chances. It didn't feel like they were hanging on like Seattle did. So that's a credit to the preseason planning. I think the way that the schedule went for Atlanta in preseason was probably a little more conducive to being ready for the match, maybe more so than Seattle. But Seattle got enough out of it. They got 2 away goals. They got a draw. They're going to be fine in the second leg if they take care of business. I mean, it's right there for them, but it got more wobbly than it should have, in my opinion.
Elliot Bevan with a question this morning. He says, which MLS teams, and I guess teams have the best defense in Champions League?
Well, it's hard to say NYC after giving up 3, although I do think their focus slipped a little bit after going up so big. I don't think it's Seattle, and we've talked about that plenty. LAFC, it can't be after the Zimmerman trade. And Montreal, I don't think it is either. So it's not by default. I think Atlanta's defense is very good. But when you look at the other teams in CONCACAF Champions League out of MLS, well, there's a big difference. I think you saw it even with a makeshift backline for Atlanta on Tuesday night that they looked more composed. They looked like they handled things better than any of the other MLS defenses in CONCACAF.
Percy Herrera is in this morning. He says, João Paulo looked smooth last night. 4-0.
I agree with that.
Loved the cockiness throughout the game. That said, with Seattle potentially seeing a Liga MX team in May if they win out, do they have the best shot at the title?
A lot of people think they do. They have a great pathway to the final, and let's go ahead and pull that up so everybody kind of knows what could be coming. Because you're at that point where you can start to look ahead a little bit, and you look down the bracket and where things fall. We know on the Atlanta side, it would be Atlanta and Club America in the next round if both teams do their jobs in the home legs. Okay. The other side of that half of the bracket, Cruz Azul in the driver's seat, they should move on, and then it's either León or LAFC. And right now, you'd have to give the slight edge to León. All right, the other half of the bracket. Alianza Tigres, toss-up. New York City is going to go through over San Carlos. So they will play the winner of Tigres and Alianza. And you know NYC is really pulling for Alianza. Then on the top half, it's Olympia and Seattle. Seattle should go through. Saprissa and Montreal, toss-up. So if Seattle is going to keep going. You're going to face either Saprissa or Montreal, and Saprissa was surprisingly poor early. Montreal was surprisingly good early. What would that opponent look like in the next round? Maybe the weakest opponent in the quarterfinals, barring a Alianza upset over Tigres. So that's fortunate for Seattle. And then you would be facing the winner of New York City and either Tigres or Alianza. So you might not see Liga MX until the semifinals, and that's if Tigres gets through. But you might have to face New York City. And I don't think that's a foregone conclusion that Seattle gets through New York City. So I don't think there's any easy roads here. I mean, maybe Seattle could have the easiest quarterfinal opponent out of 8. Sure. But you get to the semifinals, you're going to have a challenge, period. So I'm not buying that it's just this cakewalk for Seattle. I don't know if they're good enough defensively. That's been my concern since they've had so much turnover. I don't trust Nuhu Tolo as a top left back in this league. And I don't know what the center back pairing is going to look like and how quickly they're going to, gel. And the bigger problem is if either one of them get injured, you're turning to Shane O'Neill, who didn't have a good year for Orlando last year. I think Shane O'Neill's a good center back. I'm going to put some of that down to Orlando, but you got to see him at a higher level. You have no real depth at outside back. Nuhu Tolo, you can move Jovan Jones back there, but then you're affecting your midfield. Kelvin Leerdam on the right side, you can move Alex Roldan back there, but he's not a true right back. Don't know what's going on with Gustav Svensson. Does he become depth at center back? Maybe, if you have to. I'm intrigued. And in the Nicolas Ladero thing, look, he went to Uruguay for treatment. It's being listed as hamstring tendinitis. That sounds like the worst possible thing for a player that you need to be healthy all year long. Because tendinitis doesn't really go away. You can have treatment on it. You can do things to help it, and one of the main things you can do is rest it. But when it's on a hamstring, gotta have questions about that. So Seattle has a very good attack. I think Paulo is a really good addition. Christian Roldan, strong player in this league. Jovan Jones, strong player in this league. Jordan Morris keeps getting better. Raul Ruidiaz, one of the top strikers in the league. All that's good. Stephen Fry, great goalkeeper. The defense, question marks. Ladero, your talisman, question marks. Depth defensively is non-existent. So are they going to be at full strength by the time they get to a semifinal if they get there? It's a valid question. With a lot of games early, it's a very valid question. So I don't know if they're quite strong enough. But you never know until you get into the matchups. If they face Tigres, Gignac could be out. There's lots of things that can happen to change what that matchup looks like on paper. I think anybody who wins a Champions League, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in Africa, Asia, CONCACAF, wins Libertadores, you got to get fortunate in some things. You got to get a little lucky, whether it's luck of the draw, whether it's luck of an opponent having a bad day, whether it's injuries to the opponent, whether it's you staying completely healthy. You got to have a little bit of luck on your side. And Seattle's going to need that, because if they have anything go against them, I don't know if they have the depth and the reserves to get through, unless they're going to be winning shootouts, unless it's going to be 5-3 kind of games like NYC had.
Two more questions that are Champions League based before everybody else wants to talk freestyle, or everybody else wants to go freestyle, I think is probably the best way to phrase it. Shiva, who was more tested who was tested more last night, Seattle or NYC? Based on what you've seen so far, who's your favorite to win it all?
Seattle easily was more tested, just because San Carlos. This is a big step for them to be here, let alone compete. So I felt like that coming in. Olympia is the defending Honduran champions. They're in fifth. They're not having the same kind of year this season, but you're talking about a defending champion team with a lot of veterans. So Seattle was definitely more tested. Looking at everybody that's in it, and I haven't seen every minute of every match. I think taking form, taking talent, and taking the draw as it currently stands into it, León is a team you have to worry about because they've been one of the top teams in Mexico for the last 8-9 months. I think Atlanta and Club America are both capable, but only one's going to get to the semis. On the other side, I think New York City is absolutely capable. Absolutely capable. They've got a team that has been together. They've got a lot of talent. They've got a lot of balance. They can play different types of systems because of the roster that they have. I think New York City could be the team to come through the other side. I think New York City shouldn't be scared of Tigres if that's who they end up seeing in the quarterfinals. Seattle, I think they're still trying to add to the roster, so maybe this is a different conversation by the time we get later in the tournament. But right now, I think they're going to need to keep everybody healthy, and they're going to need some good fortune. Against Saprissa, that could be a challenge for them. Against Montreal, Montreal's attack is top-notch. So the question for Montreal is going to be health in this next match. I don't think Seattle has a cakewalk through the quarterfinals. But New York City on that side, I think they had the best performance in the first set of games. Can they follow that up? And can they follow that up early in the MLS season? We'll see. But León, Atlanta, America, New York City, Seattle are the ones that jump out to me. Cruz Azul struggled in Jamaica. They did get it done. We'll see how they look in the second leg. Tigres has not looked good. They didn't look good. They lost to El Salvador. They're going to have a fight with Alianza. So, and Saprissa and Montreal, we kind of thought were very evenly towards the bottom of the 16-team ranking. So it's going to be a challenge for either one of them to get to a final.
Sean Vergara, who has gone back to being Sean Vergara instead of Quick Trigger Penso for his handle, says that he just watched the highlights of the Seattle match. How was that only a yellow for Arboleda? CCL needs VAR.
Yeah, it needs VAR. CONCACAF needs to create the process for it, and that's just where you're at. It's funny when people want VAR and then people don't want VAR when they aren't happy about what VAR has said to them. So you need VAR because I don't know the situation where the referee was here. I don't know if he was behind it and screened. I'm trying to find some kind of out for the referee to not give a red there other than just he didn't want to send anybody off, no questions asked. If he's screened, VAR helps you fix that. If he missed it, if he's looking at the ball and doesn't see that the foot makes contact, if he thinks Fry's making a meal of it, whatever, VAR helps you fix it and get it right. And there's no way you can argue that should not have been a red card. When you see the replay, it's a red card. VAR helps you get things right. And that's one that it's a game-changing situation. It's a game-changing situation to not give a red there. So I agree. CONCACAF needs VAR. They need to accelerate the process just a little bit. You've got 2 major leagues in the Confederation that use it, and you have plenty of people who are trained in it. You're going to have to create some workshops to get other referees trained in it. And I have no idea in terms of infrastructure and willingness at this point for the other leagues to implement it. You know, could the Honduran League implement it? Could the Costa Rican League implement it? What does that process look like? Those are big questions. But you have plenty of trained referees in being video assistant referees in the Confederation to get it started and to get it underway. And I think any major competition in the world needs it now.
All right. Now, your Freestyle Friday questions were what?
Tell me. I don't know where you want to go.
No, just to recap, just to reset what your idea was.
I think we've got plenty of. I just threw out randomly MLS predictions, but it's Freestyle Friday. People can take it wherever. I know we've got a couple questions that are different on the Twitter timeline.
We do. Let's see. And I was also going backwards to other stuff as well. Matt Wagner, in this morning, he says, scheduling in MLS is already problematic, but what would you think of an idea where Liga MX teams and MLS teams play a series of crossover games every season? Even if they were friendlies, I think it'd be great for both leagues in the sport. Hashtag Freestyle Friday.
Can't be friendlies. There's got to be something on it. And it goes back to, I think, an expansion of the League's Cup, where the League's Cup becomes some kind of a mini league type of idea. Not as expanded as the Copa de la Superliga in Argentina, where it's 11 games, but maybe somewhere in the idea of how Mexico does the Copa MX, where they play a group stage. So maybe you're adding another 4 games. You're doing groups of 3 or something, and you play everybody home and away. Because MLS needs to play some competitive games in Mexico, too. And not just in Champions League. Other teams need that experience as well. So right now, League's Cup is all in the United States. MLS teams need to travel. They need to understand how to play in those situations. So groups of 3 would give you 4 games. You'd play 2 at home, 2 away. Be okay with that. It's a lot of groups, I know. And you're basically setting it up to get 4 games. You're going to play... See, that's where it gets uneven. If you want to go to 4, that's where it gets tricky, because then you're adding 6 games. Is that too many? I don't know. Scheduling's going to be the tricky element here. I would love to see some way of getting these schedules closer to alignment. I think that would help with CONCACAF Champions League scheduling as well. You can't start as early as Mexico does. It's just impossible because of the climate. But can you start a little earlier? Potentially. I think so. You got to find the right time for League's Cup, especially if you're going to have more games in it. It's probably late in the summer, but then that would take away from the idea that we talked about yesterday of a Champions League with a group stage in the spring and a knockout round in the fall. It's going to be hard to do everything, and that's where MLS has to be really smart about picking and choosing, because remember, I mean, Libertadores is still something that's hanging out there that has been talked about at times, Libertadores and Sudamericana. So how can you make it all work? And can you make it all work without adding more roster spots, adding more money to the pot, which would have to be in the next CBA? So you've got to kind of grow into it. I agree with Matt, and I want more competition between the two. I want more meetings between the two. But I think it's got to be more than friendlies. But then that makes it complicated as well. It's going to take a whiteboard, probably quite a few cervezas, some creativity, and a willingness for both leagues to really look at this as an opportunity to grow both of their brands and improve soccer in both of these countries. There's got to be some give and take on how to make it work.
Ricky Ricardo this morning has, as a part of the predictions, Open Cup champ, he has Atlanta repeating. Campeones to Seattle. Toronto is his winner in Supporters Shield. Nashville gets the wooden spoon. Joseph gets the golden boot and the MVP. The men's national U23s make the Olympics, make it to at least a quarterfinal. The women's national team gets the gold in the Olympics, and he also says, finally, Atlanta United 2 in contention for a playoff spot this year.
I think they'll definitely be in contention for a playoff spot. And they were in contention where they kind of worked their way back into contention for a little bit late last season, but the hole was a little too large. I don't think they're going to have the poor run like they did early in the summer last year. I don't think you're going to have that this time. The roster feels a little different. You've got a few more veterans mixed in there. I think it's a little more stable. So I agree with that one. Toronto's a good shout for being around. I just don't know if they're going to win Supporter Shield because I think they'll struggle a little bit early with Bradley out. Open Cup's a crapshoot. A lot of it depends on the draw, but Atlanta's a contender for sure because I think this is a team that thrives in those kinds of situations. I think in a one-off situation, Atlanta United's a really good team to bet on because of the way this team is made up. You got guys who can win games for you, and you've got a solid base. Like, it doesn't feel like a team that's going to get blown out. They're not going to have that bad stinker kind of a day this year. It feels a little different. We'll see once we get into it, but I think a guy like Fernando Meza, his presence really helps you with that. He's just so steady. Trying to think of any of the other. I mean, Joseph obviously is going to be in the Golden Boot race. A lot of times your Golden Boot winner is your MVP. I can roll along with that. So, yeah, the Toronto Supporter Shield one is the one that I'd maybe question the most because of that Bradley injury early.
Video is a TikTok video that came out of Statesboro yesterday as Tormenta was practicing Thursday morning. And the practice fields are fairly waterlogged. And the question off of that video comes from Bartimus Prime as players are diving into puddles and swimming and things like that and having a generally good time. What was your favorite rainy day training drill? As a goalkeeper, hero saves were the most fun.
I don't remember anything specific. I did love playing goalkeeper in the rain and mud. When I was U12, yeah, it was at U12s because that was the field at Fort Gillem that it was kind of downhill. It wasn't like a huge downhill slant, but just enough to where whenever it would have a pretty good rain, one penalty area would be mud, the other one wouldn't. I'd always get stuck playing goalkeeper in the mud. And I loved it. I didn't have a problem with it. It's just when I was at that age, I usually played half the game in goal and half the game at forward. So if I started the game in goal, then I'd come out and just be covered in mud playing up top in the second half, going into the mud again. So it was funny. I loved playing, pickup games and whatever in the mud. Anything sliding to try to get on it, and you just keep sliding and sliding and sliding. That's the one bad thing about the rise of turf fields. They're a lot easier to play on when it rains, that's for sure, but you lose that mud element of it. Mud's fun.
Daniel Price. So while I believe MLS is more competitive this year in CONCACAF, man, oh man, does it look like a bad game of FIFA 20 out there, especially last night.
That's a little harsh. I mean, Seattle got tired. I think it's obvious what happened with them, and New York City just they kind of shut down in terms of focus because 4 goals, they were good. So that's a little harsh. Gwen thinks it's a little harsh too.
Gwen agrees.
Yeah, Gwen thinks it's a little harsh. Seattle just got tired.
Katie Weaver, Buenos dias. Enjoyed some bonkers, #CCL Fever after dark last night. Related, can you discuss the new changes in Liga MX Pro Rel?
Well, it hasn't changed, and this is where people will lead you to believe things have happened when they haven't happened. So there's a proposal, and AS wrote about it, that there's an idea to halt promotion relegation for 5 years. And a lot of people freaked out. Oh, this can't happen. This is terrible. You're going to be just like MLS. You haven't had a team get relegated since the end of the 2017 Clausura. 2020. So let's be real about where the Mexican League is right now, folks. Let's work backwards from there. Chiapas was relegated at the end of 2017, and Lobos BUAP was promoted. Well, Lobos BUAP should have been relegated at the end of the 2018 Clausura, but the team that won promotion, Cafetaleros, they were not certified to be promoted. And I don't know if it was down to finances, if it was down to stadium. There's lots of minimum requirements to be eligible to be promoted. They didn't meet them, so Lobos BUAP did not get relegated. Last year, Veracruz should have been relegated. They basically said, no, we're not going, and here's a big check to stay in the league. So they expanded Liga MX. Like this, Lobos BUAP stayed up because the promoted team wasn't able to take the promotion. And they didn't turn to the next team that lost the promotion playoff. They said, okay, Lobos BUAP, you stay. So that left it at 18 teams in Liga MX. When Veracruz was relegated, and it was like, no, we're not going. No. Here's money. They didn't, they just said, okay, well, you're going to stay up. So it stayed at 19. Well, then Veracruz went nuts. So the idea here is you want to strengthen the top flight by eliminating the fear of being relegated. So those teams that are at the bottom fighting this off, they want them to strengthen and grow and stabilize. They want to strengthen the second division, which only has 12 teams right now anyway, by eliminating some of these yo-yo situations and also eliminating a situation like Cafetaleros where they couldn't earn the promotion because they weren't ready to be promoted. They've got to add, I think, some more Ascenso teams over this next 5 years. They've got to get it to be, more than a 12-team league. They've got to get those teams ready to be promoted and stay up because it's been a long time since you've seen a team come up and then be competitive. It's probably Tijuana in the last decade that came up from the second division and has somewhat established themselves as a solid Liga MX team. The cynics say that because of who is at the bottom of the relegation table right now, and they do it like Argentina and some other leagues where it's over a 3-year combined table. Atlas, which is a historic club in Guadalajara, is in the bottom spot right now with Veracruz going away, and Chivas is next because Chivas has had some struggles. Well, nobody wants to see Chivas get relegated in Mexico, and it wouldn't happen, basically. They would find a way to avoid that from happening. When you look at the Mexican League and you look at who is in the second division right now, and let's compare it to England for just a second. So in England, you have proud clubs in the championship, right? You have clubs with a lot of history. You have clubs who could step up and be fine. You have venues that can be in the Premier League. You have plenty of teams that could end up in the Premier League tomorrow and be okay. Now, they're going to have to be competitive on the field, and that's maybe where the gap is bigger, but the structure of the club, it's okay. Right now in the Ascenso, you don't really have anybody outside of Atlante with a pedigree of first division play. Leones Negros has been there a few times, but not regularly in their history. Correcaminos has been really close for quite a while, but they haven't been a Liga MX team. Celaya, I don't think is exactly the Celaya that was in the first division for a while back in the 90s. Dorados has been around it now, but now they're down in 11th. Cafetaleros, who should have been promoted a couple years ago, is 0-4 right now. So there's nobody strong enough to go up and enhance Liga MX at the moment. That's why they want to do this. They want to grow both. I don't think it's such a bad idea because promotion relegation isn't exactly working as intended right now to begin with.
A couple of other, Ricky Ricardo on this particular conversation and Chris Martz have come in on it. Ricky says, what are y'all's thoughts on Leagues Cup and more specifically the way it's set up? There are CONCACAF Champions League Liga MX teams will potentially compete in this tournament while only non-CONCACAF MLS teams compete. There is a scenario where if you had 4 different trophy winners in one conference, a team who did not make MLS playoffs would be in Leagues Cup. Feels like there should be a little more parity.
Yeah, I don't think it should be this scary thing for a couple of CCL eligible teams to play in Leagues Cup either. I mean, I guess you want to spread the wealth, and I get it, but the next step when it expands again, because it will. I mean, Leagues Cup is going to eventually include everybody. The next step should be to have the top MLS teams in there too. I mean, it's a knockout tournament, so you go in and at a minimum you're playing one game. You can handle that. It's in a portion of the schedule that I think is manageable right now in the current format. So I agree. I think you should have some of the top MLS teams in it, and you shouldn't have MLS teams that miss the playoffs getting in right now in the current format. Eventually, everybody's going to get in.
Chris Martz says too many horror stories about teams that have disappeared from Liga MX in the last 15 to 20 years because they aren't financially stable to stay. Cuernavaca, Tecos, Indios de Juarez, Veracruz, Jaguares, San Luis, and Irapuato come to mind immediately.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, and that's what's scary is those teams aren't existing now. So it's not like England and other leagues where you have a promotion relegation system and teams get dropped into the second division and they fight their way back. What's happening here is teams get relegated and disappear. They're gone. So that's why right now you have a number of clubs here that are not really stable enough to go up. That's a problem. That's a huge problem. I mean, you look at the list of second division champions, and there's a lot of clubs that don't exist anymore. And clubs that won things not that far back. I mean, La Piedad won in the Apertura in 2012. Where are they now? They're, I think, in the third division. Yeah, they're in the third. It's not stable at the moment. And too many teams come and go. And that's not where the league's going to be able to grow. It's not where they're going to be able to get media coverage. They both need to stabilize. And my hope would be if they do this, the plan would be to grow the Ascenso back to the same size as the first division. So get both to 18 teams. It gives you the opportunity, if you want to look at going to either, you're going to have to probably look at going to 20 teams in Mexico if you want in the first division. What's going to be best for the game as a whole? Because right now, the promotion relegation system is not benefiting Mexican football. I wonder if this happens, and it was rumored in the AS article, if you see Liga MX teams partner with some of the current Ascenso teams that are independent in terms of player development and player loans, and kind of like an MLS USL championship deal. Might be the smartest way. It might just not make sense for there to be a dedicated, true promotion relegation system between the Liga MX and Ascenso MX, because it hasn't been working for a while. You know, this isn't coming out of nowhere. It's not. I know the Chivas thing is there, and nobody wants to see Chivas relegated because of how much that would hurt the business of Liga MX. But you know, there's just not really anybody who is strong enough to come up and stay up. And it hasn't been the case for a long time. So they've got to do something to fix that.
Jill Robbins comes in this morning, the Soccer for Good OG, and I'm going to also ask Mike when he comes on this question. So maybe think about it, and we'll push this one to the second hour. MLS players' names are fascinating. Lassi Lapalainen is my favorite, makes me smile. Yimi Chara makes me think of that lovely Argentine condiment when I hear it. As commentators, what's your favorite to say or hear? Looking forward to the diverse names across the league in 2020.
He's not in the league yet, but Ranieri Mallorquin from Motagua is a pretty good one. And it's Jimmy Chara. Jimmy.
Yes, Jimmy.
Not Yimi. Jimmy.
Yeah, sorry. Looking at the Y.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's a process. I mean, Mateo Sosetu is a pretty fun one to say. I like
yes.
it. So there's plenty. trying to think if there's anybody else that jumps out at me.
That's what I'm saying. You know, I've asked it now. We can have it as a perpetual. So when Mike comes in, we can have more ideas.
Okay.
Trey Morrison. What do we make of Nashville's PR department touting their ticket sales as though everyone in Nashville has bought tickets? Are they sincerely going to be surprised when the Stripes take over the stadium? And I've been super impressed with all the activities planned by or for 17s.
Well, they can't say, like, hey, guys, we sold over 40,000 tickets, but there's a lot going to Atlanta. You can't say that. So I get it. They're selling over 40,000 tickets. That's good. Be happy. Nothing wrong with that. I don't think they will be surprised. I think they are hoping that it is not quite the percentage that it might end up being. If the weather ends up helping, I think Nashville will have a good walk-up. But right now the weather's not looking great. So I don't know if that walk-up is going to bail them out.
Ricky Ricardo wants to know if the Fantasy League is returning this year.
It is returning. We are beta testing signups, and I think all is well. So be on the lookout for the Soccer Down Here Fantasy League presented by the Jason Wright Agency to be returning very, 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 very soon, maybe even later today.
John Nason, does it make sense that future MLS regular season and playoff scheduling has been addressed in the CBA? Disappointed with missing 3 West teams and anxious to see how 30 teams are going to be handled.
Well, I don't know how much has been said in terms of what the scheduling looks like. I don't think that's a CBA thing. For example, the competition structure of the schedule. I don't know. As you add teams, the scheduling format's going to change, and I'll be curious to see what the response is this year, because I think by doing this, and we've talked about it before, you make the schedules, you make the strength of schedule so much more uneven than it was before. And before it wasn't even, because you might get lucky with travel, with getting tough teams at home and easier games on the road. There's going to be some imbalance when you don't play everybody home and away. Now you're just not even playing some teams, and you're creating those matchups based off popularity. So the teams that are looked at as the top teams are playing the other top teams and beating each other up. Meanwhile, a team that might not be looked at as a top team gets an easier schedule because those cross-conference matchups are not as attractive for TV. It's going to have an effect. It's going to have an effect on the standings this year, and I'll be curious to see if it's pointed at as the effect on the standings and if maybe there's a change going next year.
Okay, Matthew Edelstein and Jim Lepp have a question based off of Total Soccer Show and the Tenorio podcast,
the allocation disorder podcast with right. Paul Tenorio and Sam Stejskal.
Okay. Jim Lepp is looking for a clarification / a correction. Listening to that pod last night, they said during the pod, Sam and Paul implied the departure of Nagbe was a front office decision. My understanding was that this was a player demand regardless of the front office desire to retain him.
Well, it depends on how you want to spin it. I mean, and that's the part I don't know. Look, I'm not in the front office, but the reporting on this has been pretty consistent that Nagbe wanted a move last year in preseason. It didn't happen. Doug Robertson wrote at the AJC that there was another offer made in the summer for a long-term deal, and Nagbe turned it down, and then a trade was made after the season. So, I mean, everything's a front office decision if you want to portray it that way. But in this one, it seems like the front office had no interest in losing Nagbe for nothing. I think they tried to keep him, and I think the larger conversation on the podcast was about the front office making changes because of fit and because of style and because of a transition in the way the team plays. Well, Darlington Nagbe definitely wouldn't fit into that. So that's why it was a little weird the way it was lumped together in the manner that it was. And I mean, look, they hit 3 teams in the roster conversation in about 30 minutes. So you're not going completely in depth either. But yeah, it did seem like they were implying that there was more to the Nagbe deal than if there is, it hasn't been reported and it's not public knowledge. So I don't know.
And Matthew's comment, he says they seemed puzzled as to why Atlanta didn't just re-sign Gressel and Nagbe, yet zero mention about their desire to be traded. And are they serious or just trying to stir our vocal fan base?
No, I don't think they're trying to stir up a fan base. That's not really Stajkol and Tenorio's style at all. It's opinion. I mean, look, Gressel, a lot of people think that he's worth the money that DC is going to pay him. And obviously, based off the offers that were reported that Atlanta offered him, they didn't value him at that number. That's opinion. That's always what happens in these situations. That's a cap issue. I mean, that's just, you only have so much money to work with, and you value players at a certain amount. And you can go up to a certain amount, and sometimes you can't go over that. And that was where that decision came from. Yes, ultimately, there was a request for a deal in the Gressel case, but I think the bigger issue was the fact that they saw between the player and his representation and Atlanta United and their decision makers, they saw the valuations differently. So when they couldn't come to an agreement on a number that made sense for both, player requested a trade, it was granted. Nagbe, if there's more to it, it's never been talked about. I don't think there's a situation, because of all the comments that were made after games last year, all the praise for Darlington Nagbe, I don't think it was a situation of he didn't fit the style, he didn't fit the system, whatever. And he hasn't signed a new deal, so we don't know where that part factors into it. But by all accounts, he did not want whatever deal was offered, and we don't know if Columbus is going to offer more, and kind of have to wait and see on that part. But you have to look at all of it, in my opinion, and we're about to go to a break and get Mike Conti on the line. I think you have to look at all of it as a group. And the main thing that I took away from it, and I've taken away from the whole offseason, is that you have a cap, you have limitations in being able to re-sign guys, and you have to manage the cap for the overall group. You can't let one player skew the cap. And when players are due for raises, you have to make tough decisions. Any cap league you do. And you can run a risk of trying to keep a group together and give raise, and not bringing in new blood, and then you ultimately fall. So we will see if the decisions made are correct, and that's what it's going to come down to. Is, you've made decisions based off the cap, you've made decisions based off, I do think fit factors in, but I don't think that was the case for either one of those two. I don't think it had anything to do with they're not wanted here. I think they're both different situations. I think all the transfers this year were different situations that ultimately ended with the player not wanting whatever was offered, or not wanting the role or the money that was offered, wanting to move. They got the move. That's where you're at. So we will see. I don't think they're trying to rile up the fan base. That's not how I see Tenorio and Stajkol and the way they present things. I just don't know if there's more information about Nagbe that's not public. If there is, then there's no way for us to know if it's not public. So there you go. We're going to take a break, get Mike Conti on the line, and talk more about CONCACAF Champions League, among other things, right after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yep, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service Ad Council and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Welcome back. Hour number 2, Soccer Down here, February 21st. It's a Friday. It's 10 o'clock. That means it's time for Mike Conti to join us.
Hey, guys. What's going on?
You had a pretty good night last night with Mr.
I've heard
Trey
that Trey Young
dropping
guy's
a
okay.
50 spot.
Yeah, I mean, if Joseph's going to get a mural, we're going to have to start considering some public works of art for Trey Young. I don't know if a mural would be appropriate. I don't think we're at build the statue territory yet. I think you have to win a championship to do that. But
Yes.
Boy, oh boy! I mean, that was really fun. That was a fun night last night at State Farm Arena. I'll admit that I've watched a lot of bad basketball this year. So when you get something really entertaining like that, it tends to stand out. Now you've got Trey against Luka Doncic tomorrow night, and that's going to be a lot of fun too.
Yeah, definitely. And is it correct that Quavo presented a Hawks jersey to Joseph Martinez?
I don't know if that is correct. I know Joseph was there. I know they took a photo together. I don't know if there was like an official present. It was actually kind of funny. They put Joseph up on the video board at one point in the first half, and they didn't identify him, and there was really no call for people to, pay attention to the video board. So it was just this kind of innocent shot of Joseph eating some popcorn. And then later in the game, they finally figured out that, we might want to call attention to the fact that Joseph Martinez is at the game and is on the Jumbotron. But Joseph saw a good game last night. I thought it was cool that he was out there. And what's been a busy week for Atlanta United to get out there and support the Hawks. He's a big supporter of the Braves as well. So really cool to see him there. And I had a good talk with Quavo before the game last night. He's pretty hyped about the Hawks right now.
What's it like for this city to have a front line of Joseph and Trey Young right now?
Yeah, and then on top of it, I think Ronald Acuna. I mean, we're in really, really good shape with our young superstars in this town. Trey is 21. Acuna is, 22 or 23. Joseph is in his mid-20s. I think he's the old guy right now at 26. We're in good shape. And I think the cool thing, especially when it comes to Joseph, is he wants to be here. You can see how profoundly affected he is by the love that he's getting in this city. And I thought Steve Hummer wrote a great article about that yesterday, talking about the mural and kind of as a metaphor for how the city of Atlanta has really embraced Joseph Martinez, and Joseph has embraced the city back. And Joseph would probably have a very good opportunity to move on and play in Europe or somewhere else, potentially in North America. But Joseph is staying put. He doesn't want to go anywhere because he loves playing in Atlanta so much. And sadly, I feel like that's kind of the reverse of what is usual in this city. That a lot of our professional sports teams have dealt with some apathy and some lack of interest by the fan base, and there's nothing really remarkable or special to playing in Atlanta. I feel like it's totally different when it comes to Joseph Martinez, and it's really neat to see.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, previous athletes like this that were a bit of a symbol of the city, that were as ingrained in the overall sports culture as Joseph is right now. I mean, he's popping up at Braves games, he's popping up at Hawks games, he's been at Falcons games as well. I don't remember, other athletes doing that as much in the past. It really feels like he is kind of bringing all the teams together in a way.
Yeah, I mean, Stuart Sink would do it, but he doesn't quite have the same type of swagger as Joseph Martinez.
Not
right?
quite. The khakis are not as cool as Joseph's attire usually.
And the hat burn, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, Jason. I mean, I think Deion Sanders automatically comes to mind when you talk about an athlete who was at the very top of his game, who played with a ton of swagger, and the city kind of latched on to the fact that he played with an attitude. But I still don't really think you saw Deion out at a lot of.
I don't remember Deion at Hawks games.
Right. So yeah, I'm with you. I think it's very unique. Now, it's not to say Joseph is alone in doing that. Heck, I saw Mikey Ambrose at a Hawks game a couple weeks ago. I mean, it's Joseph's not alone. He's just more noticed because of his superstar stature. And I have to say, I mean, Joseph was so gracious last night. I kept an eye on him a little bit. I mean, he was getting peppered for autograph requests and signed every single one, and had a really, really great attitude about that on a night where I think he just wanted to go and enjoy the game. So Joseph's doing everything right when it comes to representing this club and himself, and it's just really neat to see. It's great to see, and the thing I love the most, and we saw this during the Falcons Super Bowl run, and then when Atlanta United made their MLS Cup run, when the other teams in this town are going out of their way to support other teams that are having success, whether it be through social media or, like I remember Dansby Swanson and Dwight Howard and a bunch of Hawks players all chartered a private plane to go to the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. That warms my heart. When Kent Bazemore was freaking out in the Hawks locker room after they won the MLS Cup in 2018, that's the kind of stuff I love to see. That camaraderie, that to use a Dan Quinn term, brotherhood between all the professional sports teams in this town. Because I've worked in markets like in New Orleans, the Saints and Hornets for a long time did not get along at all until the owner of the Saints went and bought the Hornets, basically. But there was a lot of friction. There was a lot of friction between the Saints and the Hornets in New Orleans. And I love the fact that we don't have that here. We have quite the opposite, that our professional teams, they're competing for ticket revenue and they're competing for merchandise and things like that, but they're still supportive of each other. And Atlanta United's a big part of that, obviously.
When you have George Shinn and Tom Benson going at each other's throats, when Benson, I guess, when Shinn was regarded basically as a carpetbagger when he moved everything from Charlotte. I mean, you can understand the animosity there, but here right now you've got everybody from players to owners and things like that throwing their collective weight behind each other, and it's really cool to see. Mike, we have questions.
All right, let's do it.
All right, so this was a question that we had in hour number 1 from the Soccer for Good OG, Jill Robbins.
Okay.
And I decided to slide this question over into hour number 2. MLS players' names are fascinating. Lassi Lapalainen is my favorite. Makes me smile. Jimmy Chara makes me think of that lovely Argentine condiment when I hear it. As commentators, what's your favorite to say or hear? Looking forward to the diverse names across the league in 2020.
The two that I always go to, because the spelling and the pronunciation are just so incredibly nonsensical, are Mark Shatkovsky
Yes.
And Daniel Shallowy. I have no idea. I have no idea how you get that assemblage of vowels and consonants together and come out with those sounds. Those are always my go-to when I'm asked about, bizarre names and pronunciations. As far as names I like to say,
is there one that just lilts off the tongue that you sit there and you're just like, yeah, that just sounds cool when you say it?
No, I mean,
Escalotto.
But here's the thing. I mean, and anyone who listened to us on Tuesday night or or anyone who watched the Leones Negros match knows that I do really struggle with doing justice with the Latin pronunciations. I just do. And I apologize. It's something I'm working on, but it's just not something I'm very good at. So, yeah, names that roll off the tongue for me, Will Trapp, Miles Robinson, Bradley Wright Phillips. I can't mess those up. I prefer those. Dom Dwyer, I can get that right. Diving Dom Dwyer, I can even alliterate that.
Bob Bradley.
Yeah, right. Bob Bradley. Brad Guzan. I can do those. Where I start to really, really struggle are like, I had a game where I just could not get Christian Higuita's name right that one time down in Orlando. So those are the names that roll off the tongue for me. The names where you don't have to roll an R, deal with an accent mark, or an umlaut or anything like that.
So you were busy last night. You didn't get a chance to study the New York City and Seattle performances. But now that everybody's finished the first leg. I was keeping
an eye on it, though. You got to give me a little bit of credit.
Oh, for sure.
I was keeping an eye on it because...
Second screen action?
Well, I wouldn't say second screen, but Jason's tweets and some tweets from the clubs were very, very helpful to me last night.
So now that everybody's played their first leg... Go back to Tuesday night and reflect. How do you feel about Atlanta's performance in comparison to the overall first leg performances?
Even better because they did not give up anything in the final 60 minutes. And
that's where I was at.
I think, look, you have MLS clubs in their first competition going up against teams on the road who are 2 months into their league year. So it's not going to be surprising. Like what happened to Montreal? It's not surprising to see that on top of the injuries they had. What happened to New York City giving up a couple of... New York City's in great shape, by the way. I mean, they're in awesome shape. 5 road goals going home. And by the way, if Tigres ends up getting clipped by Alianza, and Tigres has work to do, obviously, they're down 2-1, the bracket for New York City looks awesome for them to get all the way to the final. If they finish off San Carlos and then they end up drawing Alianza, if they get through that, they're going to play Saprissa, Montreal, Olympia, or Seattle. New York City is in golden shape right now. So that was a great performance by them. But no, I just think it speaks to how well Atlanta United did in controlling the final 10 minutes of that match. And they did so shorthanded, and they did so in a very, very difficult park on a choppy pitch on a humid night. Atlanta United deserves a ton of credit because the other MLS clubs that have played so far in this tournament, while everyone's getting results other than LAFC, I feel like Atlanta United came out of their match the strongest of anyone else in MLS that played in this first leg.
Son of Ivo comes in this morning and says that De Boer's full dress rehearsal in Guadalajara seemed to pay dividends, as Atlanta United were the only MLS team not give up a goal after the 60-minute mark in leg one. Also, MLS had a marginally better leg one than Liga MX. What do you think, Mike?
I definitely agree with the point on Liga MX. There's a statistical argument for that. And yeah, I think the Leones Negros match we've talked about it a couple times that was just a really, really savvy move by Frank and Manny Tejeda, who booked the match, and everyone else with the front office involved, because it got you acclimated to the match week schedule. It got you acclimated to the altitude. The two really, really important things that put Atlanta United. Yeah, Miles Robinson got hurt in the game, and that's a drawback. But Atlanta United was better prepared for San Pedro Sula because they played that Leones Negros match. I think Liga MX is still in pretty good shape. I have a feeling Tigres is going to come back. I know they aren't playing extremely well right now in their league year. I have a feeling Tigres is going to come back and do what they need to do. They're probably going to need to win, if they win 1-0, they're through, right?
Right.
Because they would have the road goals. So, I mean, they're in pretty good shape. I think Leon is going to be okay. Cruz Azul is in great shape. America is in great shape. We're probably going to end up with MLS against Liga MX either in the semifinals or the final. I think what would be very, very intriguing, again, is if Tigres could come back against Alianza, and then you're playing New York City in that quarterfinal, and you could have America and Atlanta United. You're talking about two big-time showdowns there. Big clubs against big clubs, which will get a lot of attention in North and Central America. But you got to get there first. It's also tough for Liga MX because they're in the midst of their league year right now. It is a little bit hard, I would imagine, for some of those clubs to refocus midweek on, say, in the case of, Club America, having to kind of refocus midweek and travel down to Guatemala. Not easy. For Tigres, to refocus midweek when they're struggling in their league year and travel to El Salvador. That's tough. I can't really, indict them too much for that. We'll kind of see. It's been a very, very fascinating first leg. I think New York City obviously got the best result of anyone in this competition, but a lot of your Liga MX teams are sitting very, very pretty. Cruz Azul almost had a disaster, and they turned it into a gold mine.
The weekend in Mexico is a little interesting. Leon hosts Necaxa tomorrow at 6. Tigres goes to Cruz Azul, so they play one another tomorrow at 8 o'clock. And when you look at the table, Cruz Azul's in 6th right now on 10 points. Tigres is out of the playoffs right now in 10th, but only by a point. They're on 7. I don't know if either team can really afford to rest guys in that one, and especially Tigres, who probably needs to be ready for the match with Alianza. That's going to be interesting. And in Club America's got a tricky one. They go to Monterrey. Monterrey's desperate at this point. They haven't won yet. Mm-hmm. They're at the bottom of the table, and Club America's in 2nd. I wonder if Las Águilas might rest some folks going to Monterrey, or if they're worried about a tough contest against a desperate Rayados team.
Yeah, and I think you could make arguments for either strategy. I also think he might think he could, Miguel Herrera might think he could rotate midweek and still get a home result. Right. Because they're sitting pretty right now. I mean, they have the road goal. They're at 1-1, exact same as Atlanta United. They're 1-1 with the road goal. Herrera might think he can rotate and get by on Wednesday and go full strength this weekend.
When you look at, and Jason, this might be a question for you as well, but Mike, when you look at the preseason, what have been some of the things that have pleased you the most about Atlanta United that you've seen, and what still might be a concern on your list as we're 8 days out?
Very few goals allowed in open play is a big, big plus, and I think, again, we saw evidence of that on Tuesday. Guzan did have to make some big saves, but, I mean, you're talking they haven't given up more than 1 goal in open play in any of the matches they've played preseason or now this first CONCACAF competition. And they've done so with a little bit of a patchwork makeshift back line, especially Tuesday night with Mo Adams at right back and Anton Walks playing center back. Very, very encouraging. Shows me that Atlanta United is in good position to control possession and limit opportunities. You're never going to completely eliminate opportunities, but you can limit them, and Atlanta United is doing a good job of that. The only concern is it's not really a concern because it's something you would expect in preseason. It's just the continuity in the final third is still, I think, a little bit a work in progress. That's a chemistry issue, and part of it has to do with the midfield, and Mateus Fazetta has not been able to play a ton. That probably is, a partial effect of what we've seen, just with some misconnections in the final third. The 1-2 play that basically started off the kickoff for Pitti and Joseph is kind of an outlier, but I think we see that it's close. I think we saw that against Leones Negros, very, very close, where you had Pitti whipping in some crosses or whipping in some free kicks that were just missing Joseph's head. So very, very, very close. Timing and chemistry, and these things will come, and hopefully they'll come soon. what you hope is that you have something this Tuesday night like you had in the second leg against Herediano, where you can get an early goal, make things comfortable at home, and then really go out and have fun and play free. Because I think that's going to help just nudge that little chemistry issue on a little bit more. But I think they're in really good shape. I feel like, and this is something Jason and I have talked about a few times, John, I think Atlanta United went into Motagua in a way better mindset, much more mentally prepared for Champions League this year compared to last. And remember, they went into Champions League last year with basically a full roster, full strength aside from Franco Escobar. They couldn't even fill out an 18 this past Tuesday night, but mentally they were just stronger and better prepared. And it's obviously a product of a great training camp that Frank de Boer has run.
I think so far they've started to put the building blocks in of a foundation that will allow this team to play at a high level this season. And I like that you've been able to change the pieces around in it, whether it's the shape, whether it's the personnel, and the quality's still been there. You know, you get obvious drop-offs in talent between some players, but the quality of the overall team performance has been there throughout the preseason. That's a credit to what's being built. I think the only thing that concerns me at this point is just getting the chemistry with certain position groupings, because you've had to have some of that. You know, one player's in here, this player then is getting a visa, this player has been injured. It's kind of working through that. The fact that it's been able to be as stable as it is a credit, but you want to see how close you can get to that ceiling and how quickly you can get to that ceiling. It's only going to come with people playing together. You know, what's the central midfield pairing going to be? How is the Meza, Robinson, Escobar trio going to be in the back when they play three in the back? You know, Lennon being a linker on the right side between the back and the front. Things like that can take it to the next level, but the base, the foundation that's being built is very good.
Now, you look at, we talked about MLS and Champions League and things like that. And when it comes to the rest of MLS this year, Mike, is there anything outside of Atlanta United that storylines wise you're looking at and are intrigued by, whether it's a team or a particular player? I know we still have the one CONCACAF leg two, but a week away from the season. As we get into MLS season, what other headlines are there for you?
We're there. I think LA Galaxy. I saw the Extra Time guys were talking about this yesterday. I didn't listen to it, but something very intriguing about LA Galaxy. I think they could actually be better. I would agree with the Extra Time guys if this was the argument they made. I think they could be better with Chicharito than with Zlatan. And the Western Conference, especially with the Trafico. The Western Conference is going to be really, really intriguing to me, because I think Galaxy takes a big step forward. I think LAFC takes a big step back to the pack. They're based on what we saw Tuesday night, based on the departure of Walker Zimmerman. I'm just not confident at all in the way that they're going to be able to defend, at least at the outset of the season. So LAFC could come back. Galaxy could take a big step forward. And then you have the defending champion, Seattle, who go into the year with a lot of question marks as well. So I'm really anxious to see if Galaxy can get all the way to the top of the Western Conference table this year with the addition of Chicharito, because I do think they're going to be better with him than with Zlatan for a number of different reasons. The other team that really, really intrigues me that might be a little bit of a dark horse this year is New England, who I thought was trending in an extremely positive direction going into their playoff game against Atlanta United. Bruce Arena continues to kind of craft and mold this team into the style with which he wants them to play. They're still relatively young, but they have experience. And I think a lot of people are sleeping on New England right now. I'm not saying they're the favorite to win the East or the favorite to win an MLS Cup, but I don't think New England is that far away from that group of Atlanta United and New York City and potentially Philadelphia, like that, and Toronto, obviously, that top group in the Eastern Conference. I think New England is really, really close. And then I think, this is something Jason and I talked about off the air, but Jason made a really good argument for this. I think when we were down in Fort Lauderdale, I can't even keep straight the discussions we have together now because we talk so much. But I think people are sleeping on Nashville. I think Nashville is going to surprise some people early, the same way that maybe Cincinnati snuck up on some people at the beginning of last season. And part of it, obviously, is the emotion of everything being new and everything getting started and kind of having that expansion chip on your shoulder. I think they've made some good moves, though. I think Walker Zimmerman was a great pickup for them. Veteran goalkeeper. The spine of their team is not bad. Everyone is paying attention to what Miami has done with good reason, because there's a lot of flash and a lot of sizzle. And they've made some good big-name signings. Pizarro is going to be one of the 10 best players in this league this year, I think. But that team up the road in Nashville, I think, is going to sneak up on some people this year, at least initially. And that I'm not saying they're going to be a playoff team or anything like that. They're going to have a lot of challenges, especially with all the travel that they're going to have in the Western Conference. But I would be very anxious. Yeah, I'm going to be very anxious to see the first couple weeks of Nashville and how they play, because I think they can sneakily get some results early.
Yeah, they're going to be a fun one because I think their base is really good. I don't know. I mean, it's going to take – you want to get them into the playoff conversation. It's going to take Daniel Rios or Dominic Badji or Abu Dunladi to have a big year scoring goals. It's going to take Hani Mukhtar being a big-time designated player that maybe most people aren't slotting him in at just yet. And it's probably going to take one of Randall Leal or David Accam to have a breakout kind of year. But they're not going to get blown out. They're not going to get pounded by teams because you've got a good collection of defenders that can play in a line of 3, in a line of 4, in a line of 5. And you've got a good collection of central midfielders that give you a strong base, like Dax McCarty, Anibal Godoy, Derek Jones. And guys coming up from the USL and Matt LaGrassa and Tabrine Anunga, who I think can compete at this level. So they're going to be a tough out. It's just going to take somebody to step up to another level, I think, for them to be transcendent. But yeah, they're not going to be Cincinnati in terms of results. I don't expect that at all.
No, I'm right there with you. And you mentioned Ta Anunga, and obviously, with what we've been able to see with him in Charleston, I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do in camp and with Nashville, and see what kind of a shot he gets. It's just a guy that I've enjoyed watching at USL Championship level the last handful of years, and just want to see him see what he can do with Nashville.
All right, Mike, 2 games next week. We got Motagua on Tuesday in Kennesaw, and then we head up the road to Nashville on Saturday.
Yeah, guys, I got to admit, the last 2 minutes, my phone was breaking up pretty badly. So
okay.
I apologize.
His phone is blowing up. The season is coming upon us.
No. It's the subpar third world Wi-Fi I'm on this morning. So hopefully better when I talk to you again next.
It's all good. We will see you in Kennesaw on Tuesday.
Can't wait. And boy, if there are still tickets available, I don't know what you're waiting for. The weather looks okay, and it's going to be a great atmosphere there on Tuesday night. Looking forward to seeing everyone.
All right. See you then, Mike. Thanks.
All right. Be good.
See you guys.
We're going to take a quick break, get Felipe Cardenas on the line after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect. for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky and Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here, February 21st edition. Hanging out with us on a Friday. I think this is the first time he's hung out with us on a Friday.
Fridays
Felipe
with
Cardenas
Felipe.
of The Athletic. What's up, Felipe?
Hey, what's up, guys? Yeah, I think it is one of the few Fridays I've been on, so maybe it should be Fridays with Felipe. I like the ring. I like the sound of that.
Alliteration's
Bam.
always a fun thing. Let's start with a question that came up at the end of hour number one, because we were just talking about it as we were coming in. The Allocation Disorder podcast over at The Athletic and with Total Soccer Show. 3 teams that Tenorio and Stejkal identified that were interesting in terms of their rosters going into the season. Chicago was one, Miami was one, Atlanta was the other. And maybe some of the reasons they found it interesting were interesting to some Atlanta fans.
Right, and I think you covered it pretty well, Jason. You said it yourself. It's tough to go in really deep on each one of these 3 teams in a 30-minute podcast. But, I think Atlanta United definitely is one of those most intriguing teams. I think they always will be, but I think this season is so different just because of the turnover that happened like pretty much all at once during this offseason. So I think what Paul and Sam, who again, I recommend the podcast. I think I know they work so hard on it, and it's one of the few podcasts that I think it appeals to obviously MLS heads that really want to get in deep and into some of their roster rules, but also, these are guys that have covered this league for a long time. So anyone that, even if you're just getting into MLS, you want to kind of step away from just pure Atlanta United coverage. It's a great podcast, kind of a different vibe. So, but yeah, they talk about Atlanta United, and I think the one thing that I took away from that is that in this transition that the front office initiated when once Tata Martino decided to leave, essentially, when he said that he was going to take the Mexican national team position, that kind of set in motion a lot of what we're seeing in 2020. And this is led obviously by Carlos Bocanegra Darren Eales. They are the figureheads here in Atlanta as far as that front office goes. And so when they bring in Frank de Boer, this has been, obviously I've been someone that's written about it a lot, like the culture change. Yes, everyone has accepted that, from the front office to the players to the current coaching staff, that they understood that this was a big change culturally. Great. They've handled it. They're dealing very well with that right now. But, on the other hand, and what Paul and Sam were referring to is that, yeah, some of the changes obviously have to do with MLS, roster restrictions and players wanting deals and not being able to accommodate every single player regardless of their quality. At the same time, you do see where this club is moving. Under Frank DeBoer, under really under Carlos Bocanegra's leadership as well, and his vision. What he wants this club to look like, and it is a departure, a stark departure from what it was in year one and in year two. And so, in my opinion, my take is that it puts it. I agree with Paul and Sam that it does put more pressure on the front office. It almost, in my opinion, like takes a little bit of the pressure off of Frank DeBoer. And I think it shows at the same time, Frank is always going to be under pressure because he's the manager at Atlanta United. But it does also show what, some of the work that he's done, in keeping the club in where it is and where it was last season as well. Because, I don't think Frank DeBoer was like, sure, I don't need Julian Gressel. I don't need Leandro Gonzalez-Perez. Michael Parkhurst is retiring. So long, farewell. Darlington Nagbe, everyone knows his quality. I don't really need a player like that. I just don't believe that. And I don't think that's the case either. They were decisions, moves, transfers that were made. And now Frank DeBoer is kind of like in this position where the team, once again, is kind of like building piece by piece in certain spots of the field. And so he's having to work with what he's been given. And to be fair, he's done a pretty, outstanding job. And so that's my takeaway from what Paul and Sam were talking about. And I agree. I think you look at, will it work? I think we'll know down the road, in the middle of the season or 2 or 3 seasons from now, once this really gets going and the vision really starts to take place. But yeah, it was a club that was so identified by a manager. And now really it isn't, now, Frank DeBoer, figurehead, of course, but, his way of the way he wants the team to play, the way he wants it to be structured is much different. And so the front office somewhat took away some power tools from him and will slowly start to, re-equip that toolbox. But for now, yeah, I think you have to look at what Frank has done and kind of, stand up and applaud.
Well, and at the same time, Felipe, there are fans in the Atlanta United footprint that are used to seeing salary cap leagues, whether they follow the NBA or the NFL, and teams make decisions that they think they need to make. And sometimes those decisions are wrapped around the idea of keeping a player probably longer than his peak move on the bell curve. And it's a risk that teams take. And sometimes those risks turn out to be bad business decisions. And I think that that's also a part of this process now when you're looking at a cap league like MLS, is that, okay, there are decisions that have to be made where players are concerned. And this is just the year where you had a lot of turnover and a lot of those decisions coming up, because you don't want to have something like DC United where players leave on freeze and you want to continue to make good business decisions going forward, right? I would think.
Yeah, I think that has plenty to do with it. The front office here in Atlanta has recognized themselves that they had to make very difficult decisions this offseason, that they understood that they were moving players that were very important to, the beginnings of this club, the first era, a championship season, the identity of a club. It was not something that they took lightly. And so that's part of their job, though. They're doing their job. Those are decisions that will continue to be made in the future of this club for as long as, this gray earth is still rotating. There's going to be tough decisions made. And listen, at the same time, I agree with what Paul Tenorio said on the pod, because of course there's a layer of financials and restrictions and cap. And at the time when this was going on, the CBA was still undecided. So yeah, those were factors, but that wasn't everything. I go back to what Paul Tenorio said. It's like there is a deliberate shift because of who they brought in order to allow this coach. They have a new coach. Allow the coach to do what he wants to do. It's not going to happen overnight. Not everything happens the way Atlanta United, took off in 2017. I see it, and again, I don't have, metrics or anything, but I kind of see Frank DeBoer's build as a slower build. It's and that's not a slight. I think it's more of a process. And because of the turnover that's happening, that's part of it. There are going to be players coming in. There are going to be players that are going to be sold. There are new players that need to get used to the staff. And so, to your point, John, it is important to understand the rules of this league, and that will continue to impact roster moves moving forward. But it's not the only thing that front offices take into consideration. Like some of it is fit. Some of it is where they want the club to be, both on the field, off the field. And again, we know what the sort of deals that Atlanta United has made, the money that they have, that they are, supposedly keeping in order to strengthen the squad in the near future. And you'll see those moves start to make a little bit more sense within the process of, Frank de Boer and his era here in Atlanta.
I think that's what's so hard about MLS and running a team in MLS, because I don't know if you ever get finished building. I think you're always building because of the salary cap. Let's take a look at clubs around the world that have had sustained success. Barcelona didn't have to worry about giving Xavi, Iniesta, Messi, Busquets, Piqué raises to keep them. Just give them more money, cool, everybody's happy. You didn't have to make a tough decision. Well, we're capped. We can't give you more money. We're going to have to move one of you on. And in MLS, because of that decision that I think is always going to be part of the league, you have to be willing to go ahead of the curve in moving guys on, because if you don't, we've seen what's happened in this league. The LA Galaxy, 2011, 2012, won MLS Cup. 2014, won MLS Cup. It kind of fell off quickly in a couple of years. New England, good run in the early 2000s. They get to MLS Cup in 14, falls off. Chicago, with their run late in the 2000s, fell off. It's really hard to not consistently evolve and rotate your roster and stay on top in this league. It's just the nature of a salary cap league.
I agree, and I think that precisely is why, when I sat down with Carlos Bocanegra last summer for the piece that I wrote, and he came out and said, we do not want to ever be rebuilding. We are succession planning. I think you've seen that from what the club has done. Now, it's not. I respect it. It's admirable for someone in that position to say that and to then try to execute it, and at some points execute it. It doesn't always work, because I agree with you. The fact of the matter is, it's really difficult in this league to not be rebuilding all the time. It's really hard. And so I don't think Atlanta United is an exception to that rule.
You don't want to rebuild. You want to constantly build.
Correct. And so exactly the term rebuild, it's relative. It depends on the situation of the club. It depends on the situation of the league. The sport, what you're talking about. But yeah, I think Atlanta has said that they want to, they're going to be active in transfer windows. How active that's going to be will depend on the roster, but they want to continually try to strengthen the squad. Now, personally, I think that more than strengthening, and again, I think the club, it was so ambitious at the beginning, and they still are, but in the types of players that were brought in order to put this team on the map right away. Now I see it as the next step is how this club can really build that depth, because that is what is going to allow MLS clubs like Atlanta United, really any MLS club, especially the ones that are competing in multiple tournaments. That's how they're going to be able to consistently maintain a high level of play and compete for several trophies. It's not just the 11 guys that you have and the 3 DPs, no matter how good they are and how expensive they were. You need a full 18 to 22 players that you feel can play in these tournaments. Look at Club America. They rotated for that match against Comunicaciones. It was a rotated squad. MLS clubs don't have that luxury. I know we're going to talk CCL, but that was something that stuck out. They're at the point already, Liga MX clubs, where they can say, we're gonna throw out our second unit with a couple first team guys in this away leg, because we know we're going to get a result, whether it's a draw or a close win, because we're going back to Estadio Azteca and we're just gonna that's our That's our territory. So MLS still isn't there. They don't have that luxury yet.
All right. Since you mentioned teams in multiple competitions, what was your takeaways of the MLS sides and the leg ones in CONCACAF Champions League?
It was interesting across the board, really, for different reasons. But I think the one consistent, I guess, barometer for success and play for MLS was that this was all these clubs, their like first official match, and so they're going to be at a disadvantage. They're going to be at a disadvantage no matter how prepared they are. You're playing teams for the most part that have already played 6 or 7 league games. And like what I mentioned already, teams that are able to rotate. So I think with that kind of with those optics, you can say that Major League Soccer did okay. They essentially each team is going into the second leg in a good place. With everyone has an opportunity really to go home and close out that leg in advance. I think each team had different types of draws. I always believe that Atlanta United's was a tricky draw, but I don't think that was the toughest draw that MLS teams had. Is Atlanta United in a tough bracket? Yes, for sure. But what made Atlanta United's draw difficult was that Motagua is okay. They're a good team. They're not a high quality CONCACAF and Central American club, but they're playing consistently in their league. They have a history of playing in international tournaments, and they've been together. They have a staff that's been together, and they have a very distinct way of playing. You saw it. They're going to attack down the flanks, and they're going to just serve balls in and hope something happens. And they have good wingers. And so what made it difficult for Atlanta is what we covered and what you guys covered and what I wrote, after the match. Atlanta was in dire straits because of the injuries. I felt that they really battled, and it looks like, what Frank DeBoer told reporters afterwards is that it came to, the team talk. I asked him, and the question that I asked was like, what was the team talk before the game? Considering the roster that you had, the fact that the back line that you saw in Honduras play together for the first time on Sunday for a Tuesday match. And so I asked him what was the team talk, and his answer was that you get the result no matter in any way you can. And so that was, credit to the team for doing that and for the preparation. You brought it up, I think, Jason, that, they were well prepared, or they weren't caught off guard by what Motagua was going to do. Both clubs, I felt, it was an underrated tactical match, in my opinion, because I think you saw both teams were clearly prepared. They had both heavily scouted each other. Motagua knew where Atlanta's weaknesses were in the back line and attacked those weaknesses. Atlanta knew perhaps what they couldn't do, what they normally would like to do, and tried to correct play through those, different difficulties. And I thought both teams, did okay. And so in the end, it was a fair result. But overall, I think, MLS is okay. But listen, we can talk about CCL for days. I think the interesting thing about CCL is that Mexican clubs, even though they continue to dominate, I think the other part of that story is that, do they care as much as MLS? I think that's the other story. At this stage of the tournament, in the round of 16, do they care as much as the MLS teams? And frankly, they don't have to yet, because they've consistently won it. And MLS is still at that point where they're like, we need to do better. Every match is important. So it is a very interesting tournament because of those optics as well.
So you had a chance to catch up with Tata Martino recently, right?
Yes, that was yesterday. Yeah,
I saw that photo.
Okay, so I don't know if it came up with you and Tata, but here's the question I have based off what you just said. Like, I'm with you. I think right now, Liga MX in round of 16, they don't care about these matches as much as the MLS teams do, because they've, over decades and decades and decades of dominance over Central American, Caribbean teams. They're not fazed by it. But what struck me this offseason more than any other is the reaction out of Mexico towards MLS about, they're getting better, but no, we're still the best. No, they can't beat us. No, we're still it's starting to get a little defensive. And look, you had 10 players from Liga MX come to MLS this year. That's more than the last 2 years combined, and not just random players, big players. And I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. It feels like maybe the CONCACAF conversation is not as important to Mexico, but Liga MX versus MLS, even though they're partnering off the field, and they should, on the field, the competition's even better than it's ever been.
Yeah, it's been, that has been a hot topic, for this offseason, obviously, just because actually it really started. I would even go back to just the Campeones Cup. That was when you could probably, down the road look back and say, okay, that was when MLS, on the back shoulder, on the shoulders of Atlanta United, was able to say, hey, look, we can compete. Yeah, it was a one-off. It was kind of a fabricated tournament, but in the end, it was kind of one of those oh, wait a minute, you had a Club America side that really did want to win that tournament, and they weren't able to get it done. So that, fast forward to the off season, there's obviously players moving from league to league. The quality of the player that's coming from Liga MX to MLS, and vice versa, the type of player that's leaving MLS for Liga MX, they are some of the top players in those respective leagues. Not everyone, but a lot of them are. You can look back and say that. And so, yeah, I think Mexico has for decades, has been, they're the king of the region. They kind of gave that up in around the 2002 World Cup. The U.S. kind of held it for a little bit, but they've always contended that they're the giants in CONCACAF, and it's tough to argue against that. So, excuse me, I agree. I think when I was in Mexico watching a lot of the TV, it was you could see that from a little bit of MLS is, give them time. They're not there yet. They're getting better. Yes. And it was like these debate shows, and you had guys saying hold on, pump the brakes on Major League Soccer. They're obviously not there yet. They're getting better. Yes. The quality is there. Yes. But until a team can kind of walk through CONCACAF Champions League, walk through Estadio Azteca, walk through, different stadiums in Mexico and win. And they did talk about the Toronto side. I was watching, it wasn't Fútbol Picante, it was Fox. And so Garcia Aspe, one of the, a legendary player from Mexico, he was he was one of the guys that was totally pump the brakes on MLS. Don't give me that. Let that we're equal.
It's been funny to see some guys come out and be that guy.
Yeah.
No,
he was so that guy. And but they did that panel on Fox. This was immediately after that Atlanta United, that kind of, all those games were done on Tuesday night. They did talk about the Toronto side that got to the final, and they're like, that was a good team, but they just didn't have, the infrastructure really yet to compete on all fronts, like Mexican teams have, and the history behind it. So, to answer your question with Tata, it wasn't necessarily part of my conversation, but he, both in Charlotte and yesterday in Dallas, I mean, he was peppered with those questions because, of what Rodolfo Pizarro said recently, that, Tata gave him kind of the go ahead and said that the league is, the level of play is equal, if not, getting better, whatever, however you want to spin it. It was hearsay. Tata, and both to me and to reporters in Dallas, he was just how he is. He didn't feel like he had to defend what he said, but he was yeah, you can see that the level of play is better. He's not trying to compare leagues, but at the same time, he told me that the stark disadvantage that MLS clubs will continue to have is the calendar. That's just what it is. So you can debate on your talk shows all you want about whether MLS and Liga MX are getting closer or are more rivals than ever, what the quality is versus here versus there. But the fact of the matter is that you still had one of the best teams in MLS, perhaps the best team in MLS last season, LAFC, going against the best team in Mexico for the last 2 seasons, probably. A team that is stacked. If you don't know a lot about, León, they're stacked. They're a very good team. They're well coached. They're well prepared. And they went into that match against LAFC having already played 6 games. And so LAFC was just, what are you expecting from them to do? And so that has a lot to do with just the way MLS is structured. And so the league isn't really helping their teams either.
What player that has moved into MLS from Liga MX are you most looking forward to seeing and or following this year?
Okay, well, the easy answer are the big guys. Chicharito. I think when I go back to the conversation I had with Barda Scalotto, GBS with me, I thought he was really honest. When I go back and read that and like kind of just read the story and remember the interview, he told me exactly what they were going to do, which is so refreshing to hear a coach say, like, post Zlatan, we need a striker that can play, that can play within our system. And when Latin American coaches play, when they use that word play, they mean like guys that are on the ball, that want to get touches, that don't necessarily always play back to goal, that have vision, that can provide an assist, that can allow other guys to score goals because of the way they move and the runs that they make. And he was describing Javier El Chicharito Hernandez. I think it was, when I go back and read that, I'm like, of course, that makes so much sense. That is what Chicharito does so well. That's what he's always done, and that's what the Galaxy need. And so that for me will be intriguing to watch. Not necessarily will he bag 20 goals, but will he elevate their play, especially in the final third and without the ball. BWP, Brayler Phillips so often is, he's the proven goal scorer, but if you watch the Red Bulls when they were at their peak the last 3 seasons, he was leading their press. He was so good at just pressing and kind of the position, finding the right space and and timing, when to press, how to press. And I think Chicharito can do that as well. They didn't have that with Zlatan. You weren't going to ask Zlatan to press a center back, and so those things will be great. I think for me, obviously Rodolfo Pizarro, yes, but for my guy is going to be Pulido. I because I don't know, I'm not sure about him yet, to be honest with you. I'm that is fascinating to me. Like, what will he be in Kansas City? Obviously he's their 9. Vermees has been adamant that he is the number 9. But how prolific will he be? How patient will both Kansas City fans, the staff, and Major League Soccer in general, and the Mexican press be with him if he starts slow? Because he's coming from Chivas, where a lot of people were, iffy on his performances. He was good sometimes, he wasn't. Under Almeida, he really came through. But he's not this. Even though he led the league in goals, he isn't someone that you just can say he's going to bag 28, 30. So I think I'm going to look at Pulido. I'm going to name him as the guy that, I think the expectations are quietly pretty high on him.
I'm excited to see what Flores does in DC as well. He's one that is really intriguing to me, and maybe as much because of who DC has lost as just Flores coming in and what he adds to the table. I think he's got a lot of opportunity to run the show in DC, and are all the pieces going to fit? And now it's an even more difficult conversation with Paul Arriola injured. So all these guys I think have different levels of pressure. Even Cavallini in Vancouver, these guys who've come in, Zelarayan and Columbus, they all have pressure on them because of that expectation coming from Liga MX. It's a fascinating season we're about to head into.
I agree, and that'll continue to happen because anyone that comes from Liga MX, whether they were the star on their club or kind of they're coming to MLS because they're looking for more playing time, they're still coming with that Liga MX badge, and so they're immediately going to have to step up and show their quality and improve the team. Going back to Flores, I agree. He's such a good player. He's for the fans that don't know him. You're going to see a guy that's very, very technical, very, a left-footed guy, small left-footed midfielder that's very, extremely technical. The ball really close to his foot, can spray the ball across the field. When he has an opening, he will strike the ball, and he will strike it very well. And he's a mainstay at the national team level for a very talented Peru side. And so this isn't just some random guy that came over from Mexico. He was very good at Morelia, well respected, still can offer a lot. And I was talking to a player recently that told me that he thinks DC is one of the most stacked teams in 2020. Like, in the fact that like what they're building towards, like are they an LAFC? Will they have that type of like hype? Maybe not, but we know what DC United represents to this league, the history. And if you're an Atlanta United fan, you know they're one of those clubs that Atlanta struggles against. And I think they've gotten better. They've gotten stronger. Will Ben Olsen finally get it done? Like, that's the big question for me, but they have enough, to be one of those teams in a pretty wide open Eastern Conference to do what maybe Philadelphia did last year, to be that club that is consistently at the top of the table. And then once they hit the playoffs, it's like, okay, it's go time.
All right, we got one more week to preview MLS, and we'll be talking to you next week for sure. What should people be on the lookout for from you at The Athletic over the next couple of days?
Oh, gosh. I have so much to do. I'm stressing, you guys. I have a little bit of jet lag. I was in Mexico working on a story. I usually like come on the show and tease a little bit. I know I'm becoming that guy, but I'm not going to this time. I'm going to keep my mouth shut. But I know these stories are going to interest fans from not just MLS, but just soccer fans and the readers that subscribe to The Athletic. So I was in Mexico working on a story. I wasn't on vacation, and some big interviews coming out from probably one of the biggest stars in MLS. I'm working on that today. And then once, Atlanta United kicks off, it's back to the beat, man. It's back to the daily and finding the stories and being at training and seeing how this team comes together with what you guys mentioned before, a very, and I said it in my last piece, a highly anticipated opener against Nashville that I agree. Was it you, John? Who said it? Who's sleeping on Nashville? Was it Mike? I don't know. Maybe it was Mike. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily yes, I agree, but there's something there for sure. I think
it's very solid. Like I look at that team and it's just solid.
They've righted the ship. Remember how a couple months ago it was like, what? What are they doing?
Yeah, we were all uh-ohing Nashville, and they've kind of flipped it.
Yeah, and again, it's not like they're just like get out of their way. Nashville's coming to town, but they've got some good players. They're going to defend. They're going to be a team that will be stout defensively, and they're going to be okay with being the guys that are frustrating an attack-minded team like Atlanta United. They're going to try to get after you on the break, similar to what maybe Columbus did up to Atlanta last year very well, at Mercedes-Benz. And so, yeah, it's going to be a tough one. I think it's going to be a tough match for Atlanta United because we don't know how healthy they'll be either. We still don't know, and so it's a tough opener for Atlanta, and it'll be a great spectacle as well. So looking forward to that.
Well, make sure you're following him, Felipe Carr, on Twitter. Felipe, we'll talk to you next week. Thanks for the time. Have a great weekend.
All right, guys. Take it easy.
Be good.
All right, we're going to wrap up for a week of soccer down here. We've got a lot of stuff coming starting tonight. Pope at Harrison, Georgia High School soccer, both the girls and boys, starting at 5:30 tonight. You can listen on the app. You can listen on soccerdownhere.net. You can listen on our Spreaker page. If you don't get a chance to listen live, you can go back and listen to it on demand. Monday, Soccer Over There, back at the Brewhouse Cafe at 6 o'clock. It's an hour-long edition of Soccer Over There because you're going to get the debut episode of the run-up in hour number 2. It is a preview of Atlanta and Motagua in Kennesaw on Tuesday night. Kelly Francis will join us for that. Then, go ahead and mark these down on your calendar. A lot of you guys came out and joined us at Wild Heaven last weekend. The next time we will be out and about in a different place other than the Brewhouse is Thursday, March 5th in Johns Creek at Six Bridges Brewing. We're going to be hanging out with our friends, the Alpharetta Ambush Youth Soccer Club, talking to them about everything they're doing in that neck of the woods, talking a lot of Atlanta United, talking a lot of CONCACAF Champions League, either looking back and or looking ahead, Nashville, and then getting ready for the home opener a couple days later. So March 5th at Six Bridges in Johns Creek. March 6th, Friday night, is your first official episode of the run-up and we will be giving away 2 tickets to the Atlanta United Cincinnati home opener at the Brewhouse Cafe. So that's March 6th, 7 o'clock. Thursday, a little bit further down, on April 9th in Marietta, we'll be at Red Hair Brewing. So we got lots of things coming for you. You guys have been so awesome in listening, but also spreading the word to others. Thank you so much for being part of the SDH Nation. We'll be back with you in a few hours from Harrison High School in Kennesaw, Georgia. Until then, mucho plati, y'all.
Much plot, you.